On the day I graduated, my parents threw a party for my sister, and that was the moment I understood I did not belong to them. The house still smelled like balloons and cake when I opened the door, but the living room was empty, streamers sagging like exhausted smiles. A paper plate with her name written in glitter leaned against a pile of gifts. Mine was a folded note on the table, foods in the fridge. No congratulations. No footprints. Just the hum of the refrigerator applauding politely. I stood there in my cap and gown, tassel brushing my cheek, listening to a celebration I hadn't been invited to echo from the walls. Their laughter wasn't here, but it lingered like perfume that wasn't meant for me. That was the first time silence felt louder than applause, and the first moment I began planning my ever-so-quiet revenge. I was the quiet child long before I learned silence could be sharpened into a blade. In our house, my sister was the sunrise people woke early to admire, while I was the hallway light left on by accident, noticed only when someone needed to switch me off. She laughed loudly, failed loudly, dreamed loudly. I succeeded quietly, which meant my victories arrived without witnesses and disappeared without applause. My parents liked to say I was easy. Easy meant I didn't argue when my achievements were compared to her potential. Easy meant I congratulated her for things she hadn't done yet while mine were already finished. By 16, I understood the family rule: no one spoke aloud. Love was an investment, and they had chosen their stock. So I became useful instead. I fixed their printer, filled out their forms, edited her essays, remembered birthdays, and translated their moods before they spoke. They called me dependable, which is what people say when they've decided you don't need care. The night of the empty house wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. And confirmation, I've learned, is the most dangerous gift you can hand someone who has spent years quietly paying attention. Disrespect in my family never arrived as a storm. It came like dust, settling lightly, almost politely, until everything I was had a thin gray film over it. At dinner, my father would ask my sister about her day first, even when I'd just come home from an exam I'd studied months for. His eyes would pass over me briefly, the way people glance at furniture to confirm it's still there. When I answered anyway, he nodded without listening, already turning back to her story about someone else's party, someone else's plans, someone else's life. My mother had a habit of praising me while sounding disappointed. "You're so responsible," she'd say, smoothing my sleeve, her smile gentle but distant, as if she were complimenting a neighbor's child. Then she'd turn to my sister and brighten, voice lifting half a note higher, warmth finally switched on. Even photographs understood my place. I was the one holding coats, adjusting angles, stepping aside so they could get a nice one. No one ever noticed I was missing from the frame. I didn't protest. I watched. And the longer you watch people who think you're invisible, the more they reveal without realizing they're being seen. The decision didn't arrive dramatically. It came the next morning, quiet as sunrise, while I folded my gown and placed it back in its plastic cover. The house was still empty. No messages. No apology for the night before. Just the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, steady and unconcerned, as if time itself agreed I was no one worth waiting for. I sat at the table where the note still lay. The ink had bled slightly into the paper fibers, softening the words until they looked almost kind. Foods in the fridge. Not "we're proud of you." Not "we missed you." Just instructions, like I was a guest who needed directions in someone else's home. That was when I understood something with absolute clarity. They weren't cruel. Cruelty requires intention. They were comfortable. Comfortable people don't change because nothing hurts them enough to try. So I stopped hoping they would notice me, and I started planning what would happen when they finally did. I rinsed my plate, dried it, set it back exactly where it belonged, and walked upstairs to pack a single suitcase. The moment wasn't loud or dramatic. It was precise. And once a quiet decision is made without anger, it's almost impossible to undo. I didn't leave a note when I walked out. Notes are for people who expect to be followed. I closed the door softly behind me and began the only conversation that mattered, the one between patience and time. For years, I had handled the practical parts of our household because no one else wanted to. I knew the passwords to the insurance portal, the renewal dates on the mortgage, the login for my sister's scholarship applications, the spreadsheet where my father tracked expenses but never balanced them. They had trusted me with those things the way people trust a clock, not out of love but out of habit. So I used what I already understood. I transferred my savings into an account they couldn't see, updated my mailing address on every document, and removed my name from the shared utilities I'd quietly been helping pay. I drafted formal emails instead of emotional goodbyes, each sentence clean, polite, legally precise. No accusations. No explanations. Just facts and signatures. I didn't slam doors. I documented exits. By the time they noticed I was gone, the version of me they depended on had already been archived, organized, labeled, and permanently out of reach. The consequences didn't explode. They surfaced slowly, like shapes rising beneath still water. 3 weeks after I left, my father sent his first message, a short email with no greeting, asking for the password to the tax folder. I read it while sitting in a sunlit cafe, steam from my tea drifting between the screen and my face. Outside, strangers passed who had never known me as an afterthought. I replied with a single line, "I'm sure you'll figure it out." Polite. Neutral. Final. More messages followed over the months, each one slightly less certain than the last. Questions about due dates. About documents. About things that used to just work. I imagined him at the dining table I'd wiped every night, papers spread like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. Not angry, confused. Confusion is heavier than anger, it has nowhere to go. I never blocked him. Silence is most effective when it's voluntary. A year later, the voicemail arrived. His name glowed on my screen while rain traced slow lines down my window. I let it ring, watched it stop, and set the phone back down. For the first time in my life, they were the ones speaking into quiet, hoping someone would answer. The reactions reached me the way distant thunder does, softened by miles, impossible to ignore. An aunt called first, her voice careful, as if stepping across thin ice. She said my mother seemed tired lately, that the house felt different, that my sister had started double-checking things she used to hand off without thinking. She never asked why I left. She asked when I was coming back, which told me everything about how they understood absence, not as a decision but as a delay. A former neighbor emailed to say my father had been asking if anyone had heard from me. Not angrily. Not proudly. Just asking. I pictured him standing at the gate in the evenings, arms folded, staring down the road like someone waiting for a delivery that had been marked return to sender. Nothing dramatic collapsed. Their lives continued. Dinners, errands, conversations, only now every small inconvenience carried my outline. My absence had shape. Weight. Utility. And that was the real shift. I wasn't invisible anymore, I was missing. Why should anyone care? Because being overlooked teaches you something dangerous, the exact value of your presence. And once you learn your worth in silence, you never again accept a life where you have to ask to be seen. I finally listened to the voicemail on a quiet Sunday morning, not because I missed them, but because I no longer needed anything from what I might hear. His voice sounded older, like paper folded too many times. He cleared his throat before speaking, the way he used to before asking me to fix something. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just said my name once softly and asked if I was doing well. I realized then that revenge had never been the point. Distance was. Space wide enough for me to hear my own thoughts without interruption, to discover that I wasn't quiet because I was small. I was quiet because I had been saving my voice for a place that deserved it. I didn't call back. Not out of anger. Out of completion. Now my days belong to me. My work, my meals, my victories witnessed by people who look directly at me when I speak. The future isn't loud or triumphant. It's steady. Chosen. Mine. Some stories end with reconciliation. Mine ended with recognition, the moment I understood that the silence I once survived had become the peace I finally owned.